Good evening, Gateway families. Thank you so much for being here. It's 6:05, so we are going to get started. My name is Sharon Olkin. I am the Executive Director of Gateway Public Schools, and I really appreciate you being with us virtually here this evening. It feels like it's been much too long since we've seen you in person, seen your faces. Even a little Zoom square would be nice. But we appreciate you being here with us tonight. And we're excited to be able to share with you some news about how the school year is going to start. We really appreciate, as we've been in this unprecedented and crazy time, all of your support and patience as we have been weathering the storms of public health and public health guidance. And so at this point, we feel like we have come upon the plan for the start of the school year that feels the safest, most responsible, and also best to plan around. And so that's what we're going to share with you this evening. We hope in this town hall you get a lot of questions answered. We hope to hear some of your perspectives. And we really look forward to continuing to talk through all of this with you in the month ahead before school starts. Just a quick thing about health and safety. Before we start talking about the plan for the beginning of the school year, really the main reason that we are starting the school year in full distance learning, as you know at this point, is because there are so many concerns and ever-changing realities related to health and safety. And so before we are at the point when we are bringing students back onto campus, which we hope will be at some time in the fall, fingers crossed for all of us, because we miss our kids dearly. We will have another meeting just like this one so we can answer your questions specifically about health and safety protocols that we're putting in place for the safety of all on campus. Since we're not doing that right away, we're starting in full distance learning. Tonight, we're going to try and focus on what the start of the school year will look like. And so if you have questions about social distancing on campus, cleaning protocols, cohort models, all those things, we will mostly save those for another time, just so you know, so that we can talk about what we are going to be doing when school starts. But I just really, again, want to thank you for being here with us, for all your partnership, all your patience. I saw the list of names who are here, and you are so near and dear to us. So thanks for being here. And with that, I'm really excited to turn this over to tonight's panel of awesome Gateway High School leaders who are going to talk you through the plans and answer your questions. Thanks so much.
Hi, my name is Amorne Edinburgh, and I am the new Dean of Culture and Community for Gateway High School. Just a quick little bit about myself, since I know I am a new face for most on this call. I have been working in education in San Francisco for the last going on 6 years, working with various communities throughout San Francisco as a teacher, a coach, and as a dean as well. So I look forward to meeting all of you, hopefully really soon in person, and meeting your wonderful and amazing children. But until then, I hope that you are staying safe.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebecca Wieder. I'm co-principal. I'm really excited to be here with you, even if it is virtually. I've been at Gateway for 15 years. It's a community I really love, and it's one that is full of creative partnerships. And so I feel like we're in a good position to be moving through these challenges together. And I look forward to getting to hear and hopefully answer your questions.
Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Casaran. I am also a co-principal at Gateway High School, former assistant principal, so I've been fortunate enough to meet many of you, and if you are new to the Gateway community, welcome. This is definitely a unique way to start a high school experience. This is going to be my 6th year at Gateway. Not at all how I imagined starting a new principal position, but there is not a group of folks and a community I would want to do this with more than this one. So thanks for being here.
All right, so let's just quickly review some community agreements. We just really want to acknowledge and recognize that this is a very unique time. So as we go through this process, we want you to know that we are partners in finding these solutions. So this town hall, as well as other forms of communication that we'll use with you, will just be to keep the lines of communication open and to let you know that we really do appreciate your diverse opinions and perspectives. And we do recognize that this is a challenging time for everyone involved, for you as parents, for the students, for us as staff. It's definitely a trying time for everyone. So we just want to make sure that we honor that and let you know that we know that you're going through challenges, as are we. And we hope that throughout this process, we can maintain a respectful environment. And then, oh, thank you. And then some of our Zoom norms as well. You are not on camera, and the audio is not working for you as well. So we're going to be using a Q&A feature. You will probably hear this throughout the presentation a few different times, but you can ask questions through the Q&A feature. We do ask that you wait until after the presentation because most of your questions will be answered. And if your exact question doesn't get answered, we're going to do our best to combine similar questions. So maybe your exact answer won't, or your exact question won't get answered, but one very similar to it will. And then any questions that don't get answered during this time, we are keeping track of all of those questions, and we will make sure to respond to you online and send them out. And then just some common understandings. We all want our students back in person. I can't wait to meet the students, and it's hard to believe we're going to start the school year out without me being able to meet the students, but we recognize that, you know, everyone wants a student to be back in person. We know the best form of learning is one-on-one in person, where we can really help and support our students. And we know that distance learning isn't ideal for every family and every student, and it presents challenges. However, our first and utmost priority and responsibility is to make sure that everyone, students, families, staff, and all of the other family members and people that you're connected to are safe. So that is our priority moving forward, and that definitely guided our decisions for what the plan is for reopening.
So an important piece of this process has been hearing from all of you so that we can understand what your needs are, what you're hoping for. So we really thank everyone who was able to fill out the family survey we sent in June. We learned a lot from it. Some of the key takeaways were that families' preference, if we were to return to campus, would be for a hybrid learning model. So where students were on campus 2 days a week and distance learning 2 other days, so that we could minimize the number of students in the building at the same time, and that's for health and safety reasons. We also heard from you that having daily live online engagement was important. And we also heard from students that they were hoping for more structure in their day. And so that is something that we will be planning for in the fall. We also heard that despite all of our collective efforts to get folks the devices that they needed, we handed out a lot of computers, that there's still challenges that families were dealing with. Maybe you had devices at home, but it turned out that actually all 4 family members needed them at the same time, and that was a challenge. And so it was very helpful to know what was challenging and what you all are needing as we head into a new version of distance learning. So what we've been planning for are actually 2 models. One is a full distance learning model, and that's the one we'll be beginning with. because of health and safety guidance. And then we've also been planning for a hybrid model. So that's the mix of in-person learning and distance learning, where students are doing 2 days of each per week. And we needed to plan for both of those because we imagined we would need to use both during the course of the year, or potentially, depending on the health picture in San Francisco, even toggle between. And so those are the two models that we've been working really hard to develop, and we know that you're eager to hear more about. So as Sharon shared earlier, and in an email to families a week or so ago, we have opted for a phased reopening plan. And so that means we're going to start with distance learning, and then when it is safe to do so, we'll move to a hybrid model. And so we wanted to share our thinking behind starting in distance learning and then phasing in. And the main priority, as Amorne said, is health and safety. And the guidance that we have seen hasn't indicated that it is safe for us to return to campus. And in fact, Governor Newsom on Friday announced that schools that are in counties on the state watch list are prohibited from opening until they are off the watch list for 14 days. And San Francisco has unfortunately joined that watch list. So even if we had intended to go back in person, that would now not be possible. So again, our phased reopening is about aligning with state guidance, like Governor Newsom's. It's also about aligning with San Francisco Unified's plans, which are also heading in the same direction, starting with distance learning. We also know that planning for both distance learning and a hybrid model is an undertaking for teachers. We know it's a lot for families to plan for. We want to make sure our building and our PPE is ready. And we don't want to rush into any of those things. It's important to do both versions as well as we can to serve your students. So we believe a phased reopening will allow us to be more prepared and also allow us to adapt to guidance from the state. There's a lot of moving parts. We're getting new guidance by the day. And so we want to be making the best decisions we can with all the information that's available. So the first phase will be at a distance. And in order to get ready for that, we're going to be distributing laptops for each student. We realized, given the challenges that students and families faced in the spring, that having a Gateway configured laptop was a really important, necessary piece for students' education. And so we're excited to provide that this year. Each student will have an appointment to come and pick up their laptop during the course of the weeks of August 10th and 17th. We're distributing laptops for both Gateway Middle and Gateway High School. So that's a lot of laptops. So we're gonna have a very coordinated and safe approach to that. And there'll be more to come and an email inviting you to pick an appointment time. Then on August 17th, which is our planned first day of school, we will launch distance learning for all students. More to come on the details of what that will look like, including a weekly schedule. We will also be doing virtual orientations for new students to get to know who we are as a school, to make sure that new students are ready to use our technology, and to get them settled. So distance learning, it has the same name as what we did in the spring, but I've heard people say that what the entire country was doing in the spring was more like crisis learning. And so our intent is that distance learning is going to be a 2.0, even better version, given all that we learned in the spring. And so some of the ways that it will look different is that we will have more live learning with a more structured schedule. Again, responding to feedback from students and families, and also adhering to some new guidance from the state. The state did not provide guidance or requirements for the distance learning we did in the spring, but they have just released guidance for the distance learning that many districts are preparing to do this fall. And so some of the changes include things like we will be taking attendance, and attendance would include things like did a student come to the live learning session, or did they turn in their assignment? Have we interacted with them during the course of the day? And we think these are some helpful guidelines for supporting all students, making sure that all students are connected and learning, and keeping our flow of communication with you all going as well.
And when it is safe to do so, we will be transitioning into phase 2, which is our hybrid model. Again, this will be pending public health guidelines and safety measures in place so that students who are returning to campus are able to do so in a healthy and safe way. The hybrid model would mean that 50% of students would be on campus at a time, which is why they would be on campus 2 days a week for in-person learning and doing their distance learning work the other 3 days of the week. The date for when we can move from phase 1 to phase 2 is to be determined. Governor Newsom's directive is that in-person learning is prohibited for counties on the watch list, which San Francisco currently is. And so we will make the plans to begin in-person learning only when the public health criteria has been met, which means that San Francisco has been off of the watch list for at least 14 consecutive days, and that SF public health officers approve. We also, again, want to make sure we have met the requirements as a school community to ensure that we have what we need on campus before students are returning. We know that coming back to school 2 days a week is new for almost all of us, and we are going to do what we can to try and schedule those days based on preferences, which includes coming to school the same day as your sibling, and or if you carpool with another student. We want to try to make school as safe as possible and to make this transition back as easy as possible for families. So we will have a survey that's going to come out to get that feedback from you, and there'll be more on that a little later. And when we do return to the hybrid model, I know lots of folks have questions about what school will look like. And again, this is where we are really closely following the recommendations of the Department of Public Health. We are planning that classes will have 12 or fewer students. And we have already projected how many desks are possible while maintaining 6 feet of social distancing in the classrooms. And so we are planning on scheduling at about 12 or fewer. Masks will be required with an exception for those who have medical conditions that prevent them from wearing it. And if that's the case, then we can talk privately about what that would look like. We are also looking at ways of staggering transition times as well as start and end times, so that we're reducing as much traffic flow at the beginning of the school day and the end of the day, as well as during the school day, so that students are within the same cohort of kids as much as possible. There will also be very limited, if any, shared equipment. Guidance says that students should not be sharing equipment, which is a part of why the Chromebooks are also going to be a really important educational tool for students. And the spaces that we've used in the past, such as the cafeteria, are likely to not be spaces that we open up to students when we return. Daily health screenings and or temperature checks will likely be a part of our school day, as well as really clear protocols for school staff on what the follow-up looks like if there is a person or a family member who's presenting with symptoms. So these are all of the measures we are already planning for, and again, are keeping really close eyes on recommendations for, so that all of these structures are in place when the time comes that we do return to campus. And there's a few things that we're still working on, and we want to be transparent about what those things are. We are still finalizing what exactly the hybrid model might look like and how we're scheduling students. We had a chance to meet with our faculty on Monday, and a survey went out to kids on Monday as well, where we're getting some feedback from them about how they'd like to return to school and how they'd like to organize their schedule if we are still in a distance learning model, and hope to have a decision about that by early next week. We're also following the news on learning hubs. Some of you may have heard or seen in the Chronicle today that the city has announced that they'll be creating what they're calling learning hubs for up to 6,000 students. And the hope and the plan is that those will be spaces that kids can access during distance learning so that they're able to get some support. And the priority would be going to low income, foster youth, public housing, transitioning students, or any students who otherwise might have some challenges learning during distance learning. The plan is that those will be available Monday through Friday. And apparently Hamilton, which is across the street from Gateway High School, will be one of the locations. And so we'll continue to keep an eye out on the city's announcements about what those learning hubs will look like. Their timeline is that registration begins August 15th. And those hubs would not start until September 14th. So again, we'll keep an eye out on what they share about that and make sure that Gateway families are in the loop about what those opportunities can look like. We're also exploring the idea of using our outdoor space. Gateway High School is really fortunate to have a really big yard or plaza or whatever. I've heard so many different names for it, which includes outdoor seating and garden space and lots of areas that we know even in the past our teachers have used as a way of expanding learning outside of the classroom. And so we're going to continue to explore what that might look like. We're also in conversation about what kind of support families will need. We know that the reliance on technology can be really hard for students to be able to coordinate. And it can be hard to know as a parent or guardian how to support your kid when they have like 6 different Google Classrooms and Power School and all these other platforms. And so we're thinking about ways of giving you all some tips and knowledge and education around how to best support your student during distance learning. And our counselors are also thinking about how to support their wellness and well-being. We want to acknowledge that it has been really hard for everyone, and especially for young people in a lot of ways, and we want to attend to their mental health and wellness and holistic well-being, and to partner with families on what that might look like. An important thing as well, and what is especially important for high schoolers, is a sense of connection. It was incredible how many kids emailed me saying that they missed school after we closed. And there were some kids I was a little surprised to get that email from, but I think that that really speaks to the sense of connection and community our kids feel when they're on our campus. And so we are thinking about how we can keep a sense of that alive, and we can keep our kids connected even at a distance. And so that includes what advisory might look like, keeping clubs going. Athletics has announced, and we'll be sending more details, that their leagues and teams are suspended in the fall, with the earliest team scheduled to begin in December. But we know that being a student athlete is really important, and we don't want that sense of identity to be on hold for our kids. And so again, we're thinking about ways they can stay connected to their team and to their coaches, even remotely. And similarly, we know for our seniors, they are expected to complete PE hours and community service hours. And so those are things that we are going to still have available given the new context. And so we recognize those are things that are going to look different. But we do want to make sure that there still are opportunities for kids that they can participate in, regardless of if we're in a distance model or the hybrid model, or we're fully returned. And so a couple of next steps, we are sending out a survey on Monday. And this is a survey we are hoping to get a 100% return on, because this is our chance to hear about the specific needs of your student. And that includes tech needs, that includes any scheduling preferences, if there's health considerations that we should be aware of. This is our chance to really hear from you about your students' specific needs this fall. We'll also be sending out emails with details, like Becca said, about laptop pickups. And for the families who picked up a laptop in the spring, it's your chance to return a laptop. I know lots of folks have had questions about what if we already have tech at home. Laptops are being distributed to every Gateway student, and that's because we need each Chromebook to be configured in a way that's compatible for the way that we're planning on teaching and learning. When we do return to school, we're also going to have those Chromebooks set up on our Wi-Fi. We're going to have a center available to help with tech support. We're going to have chargers available. These are things that can't work if we have a wide range of tech devices, which is why all of our students are being provided a Chromebook. We'll also send details about schedules and the distance learning plan and grading as soon as they are finalized in upcoming weeks. And again, as Amorne mentioned, any of the questions we don't get to today, we will be sending out in an FAQ to families next week. So if you have a specific question that we're not able to get to in the time we have, that'll come out as well. So look out for that. And so now that we've had a chance to talk and give you an overview of what we know about what school will look like as we return, we want to give you a chance to ask questions. And so if you can click on the Q&A image at the bottom of your Zoom window, you can type in your question and hit submit. And we're going to do our best to answer as many as we can in the time that we have, and try to start with questions that seem to be the most popular. But we're going to give you all a minute or two to submit some questions, and then we can jump in with some Q&A. right, I think we're going to get started answering a couple questions. And you are welcome to keep plugging them in as we go. So there's a question about what considerations Gateway will make when scheduling students for on-campus learning. Again, we're going to have a survey that goes out on Monday, where we will be taking into consideration siblings and or carpooling restraints or other ways that students are hoping to get to travel to and from school together. We're also hoping to keep kids in as small of cohorts as we can, which means 12 students or fewer in a class. And I also want to acknowledge, this might look a little different between the middle school and the high school, given that our high school students have more of a range of course selection. And so a part of the scheduling is also going to be on class availability, which is true anyway when we create a schedule. But those will be a couple of the things that we're keeping in mind as we create the schedules. Another question is about what will students' class schedules look like during distance learning and in-person learning? How many classes per day? That was actually the question that we put out to students and to faculty on Monday so that we can get a sense from them about what kind of weekly schedule would support their learning the best. And what we do know so far is, again, that it's going to be 2 days a week. I can tell from the feedback already that I think most folks are leaning towards a Tuesday, Thursday, or Wednesday, Friday schedule rather than back-to-back consecutive days. But which blocks are offered on which day and what time, those levels of details we have not yet figured out. And we're going to wait until we've gotten the feedback from students, which we ask that they submit by tomorrow before we make a final decision. There's a question also about learning supports. What might IEP services and learning supports look like during distance learning and the hybrid model? I'm going to hand that one over to Becca.
Yeah, so we are committed to providing every student with the support they need for learning, and specifically for students who qualify for an IEP or a 504 plan. Their services and accommodations will be ongoing through distance learning. We coordinate our special education program through San Francisco Unified. So we are waiting on their guidance for what their services will look like during distance learning. But we already are planning for strategies like collaboration and co-planning between core teachers and resource specialists to make sure that students with IEPs have access and accommodations. In the spring, we did a lot of work with students in small groups and one-on-one, which we will be continuing as needed with students. IEP case managers and also the 504 coordinator will be reaching out to students who have 504s and IEPs when we start school to make sure that we have all the accommodations in place and that students are settled and getting what they need. But if you have questions about any of this, do feel free to reach out to me. Or if you're in touch with Marlise McCullum, who is our director of the Learning Center, you can reach out to her as well. So we also, Stephanie mentioned this earlier, but we do see a question about computers. So even if your student has their own computer, we're going to ask that they pick up a Gateway computer, so it'll be configured for our learning platforms. I also see a question about distance learning. I'm sure there are many, but the one that's popping up now is, will Gateway offer a place for students to work who don't have internet access at home? And actually our first approach is going to be ensuring internet access for all students. And so again, that's part of the survey that we're going to be sending home, is to better understand what each family's internet access is like. We know that there is a range. You might have it, but it might not work as well as you would like it to. Certainly my experience. And we want to make sure that students' internet access is strong enough that they can be participating in live learning. And if it's not, we'll be helping families figure out how to solve that problem.
Hi, team. Hi, we have worked our way through a lot of the questions. So I can send you some questions now that are the most upvoted within our doc here. And families, as you keep sending in questions, we're going to answer these in the order in which they were sent in right now and focus on the questions that were asked the most so far. Becca and Stephanie have answered the majority of those right now. And so here's what we have at this point. There are a lot of questions about what the schedule is going to look like for distance learning. Like, what are the hours of the school day going to be?
Yeah, so as Stephanie said, we are getting some feedback from students, and we've gotten some feedback from teachers on some hybrid models. And actually, the hybrid model will inform our distance learning model, because whatever blocks are scheduled for the hybrid, they need to match the distance learning. And so as we land on a hybrid model next week, we'll know more about the distance learning schedule. I know that's a lot to keep in mind. Both those models are related to each other. But the kinds of things that we'll be keeping in mind are the threads of the feedback that we've gotten. We're thinking about how to time classes so they're at optimum learning hours for students, but also within the workday. We know that teenagers love to sleep late, but we can't start our classes at 8 p.m. As much as that might suit schedules. So we're trying to find a happy medium. So that's one of the considerations. We're also thinking about optimum lengths of classes for a live learning situation. We usually have long blocks. 90 minutes is a long time to be on a Zoom call with your class. And so we're getting feedback from stakeholders about what they think would work best. We're also thinking about how much students can manage on a given day on Zoom. Zoom fatigue is real. And so there are lots of considerations that are going into that schedule. And we'll be getting feedback all along from you and from your students to make sure that what we're doing is working.
Great, thank you. There are a couple questions also about having an opportunity to retrieve locks or locker items that are left at school from last school year.
Oh, that's a great question. We would probably coordinate a pickup at the same time you'd be picking up the Chromebook. So if there is a student who needs access to the building, I would say to reach out to me, and my email address will present at the end of the slide so that we can make sure that your appointment time will allow time for that as well.
Great. Let's see. And then will there be any tutoring for students who are new to using Zoom or any of the other technologies that will be used for distance learning?
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at the best ways to provide that sort of guidance and the timing. But it's imperative that all students feel comfortable using our platforms. And so we will have a plan for that as well for new students. And just to be real, we're also going to be using new tech tools in all of our classes that will be kind of coaching students through, that we hope will enhance their learning. So we're all learning how to do school in a new way. And we'll just be continuing to take the temperature of what students need support with in terms of tech and their learning.
Yeah, we also are fortunate that our partnership with Boys and Girls Club is also continuing. We know that they've been a huge resource for kids in the past, and while their services are going to look a little different, you know, not having the study cafe open, we are in conversation with them about how their staff can continue to support our students given the new context as well. So you know, even though we're having to look at a lot of things differently, I think we're in a good place where, you know, we're not losing elements of our program and our support and our partnerships. Those are all still existing. We're just thinking about ways of readapting. And so they'll be one of them as well.
Great. Once we enter phase 2, will I have the choice of keeping my child at home if I'm not comfortable with the hybrid learning model?
Yes, we know that there are a number of reasons why students or families would not be comfortable with coming to the school building. And so that is also a piece of the survey we're going to be sending on Monday so that we get a better sense of what each family's needs and comfort level might be. But you know, the safety of students comes first, and so yes, there will be options when we get to that place.
Great. In thinking about distance learning and just getting through the school year, and you know, not knowing how long we'll be on distance learning, will we maintain the same structure of exams or project-based learning or group work that we would normally have in a school year?
Definitely project-based learning. There are actually ways in which distance learning lends itself to project-based learning. And certainly having a one-to-one computer program really supports project-based learning. We are a school that does a lot of collaboration in our learning, and again, we'll be leveraging technology to do that. So absolutely, those pieces will go forward. Things like final exams may not look the same if we're still in distance learning at that point. But other assessments, smaller assessments, can go forward online in similar ways as students did them when they were in person, though they'll obviously, for the most part, I imagine, be submitting them online rather than completing them paper and pencil and taking a picture, although that, you know, for some students that may be an option. So, you know, our approach throughout this has been to be flexible and accommodate students' needs. And so we'll be keeping those things in mind when we're planning learning experiences and when we're planning assessments.
There is a question, and this seems like it's probably coming from a parent who is a new 9th grade parent from our middle school. Will distance learning at Gateway High look like it did at Gateway Middle in terms of using Google Classroom, which is, I have a second part of that question, which answers for returning parents as well. We have some repeats around what will those what will distance learning look like now this fall versus last spring?
Yeah, so some similarities, like Google Classroom, that is the system that both schools use and has been a great and integrated way for students to learn when they're in the building and at home. So that is a thread. I don't know the details of Gateway Middle's distance learning experience, but from what I've gathered, I think there will be other commonalities in terms of some crossover of other learning tools. And then our approach to teaching and learning across the schools is very similar. So I know that Gateway Middle was, again, trying to keep a collaborative kind of whole child approach to learning even at a distance, and that's something we will be doing as well. Some things that will look different will be, as I mentioned earlier, more structured schedule with more live learning.
And I think the increase in structure is also going to be an increase in a little bit of accountability. And I think that was feedback we heard from a lot of families in the spring for us, was just that it felt like there wasn't necessarily enough structure to hold students. And so we'd get a lot of kids who were sleeping in and then staying up really late or having a hard time keeping up. And so I think as we move into this second round of distance learning, those pieces that Becca is talking about will also help with some more structure and accountability for students remotely.
And you guys touched on this a little bit, but there's a few more questions that came in related to thinking about PE and community service hours. So will there be online PE classes, and will those requirements still be in place if students aren't able to complete PE or community service?
Yeah, so the PE hours are a state requirement. In order to receive a diploma in California, you have to complete those 20 credits or 240 hours of PE. So that is still true. Even for the spring of 2020, that was not waived for graduates. The requirement to offer PE has been waived. However, we have not yet made a decision about whether or not we're going to offer it. We know how important it is for students to physically stay active, and for a lot of students, that's their only form of self-care. And so we want to encourage that, whether it's through a PE class or through other ways. So our plan is, regardless of if we offer a PE class or not, our students will still have access to PE hours that they can complete during shelter-in-place orders. And that was true for what we did in the spring. That included things like, in-home yoga or other videos that we linked so that students had resources about what they can do with their time. And similarly with community service, that is a gateway graduation requirement. We recognize we might need to practice a little bit of flexibility in what that looks like, given how long this pandemic continues. But our hope is to still make available to kids community service hours and opportunities, which we know still exist. We've got a couple kids who are doing different things for community service this summer. We've had students who have reached out and have offered to help with orientation or onboarding of new Gateway High School students. We've had some who have been wanting to organize a tutoring program for Gateway Middle. And so I think our hope is that we'll still have access to opportunities for community service that, again, we know might have to look a little bit differently.
Great. So just to note the time, we only have 8 minutes left, so I think we can fit in 2 more questions. And any questions that are not answered here tonight live, we are taking every question that has been submitted, and a full question and answer will be posted on our website at the end of next week, as will the recordings of this town hall, our middle school town hall, and our Spanish language town hall will all be available next Friday. And again, if you did not get your answer or your question answered tonight, you can always reach out to this team as a follow-up to get an answer that you feel like you need right away. So the last 2 questions are our most asked that are left. The first one is, how will grading work with distance learning and as of school starting?
So that's a great question. As with a number of the problems to solve right now, we want to have the best guidance that's available from the state. In the spring, for example, there was guidance from the state about how to approach grading, and so we were glad to have waited to get that rather than having to change our policy. It's also one of those things that everybody would like to know the answer now, myself included. So I understand that it's hard to wait on this one, but we do think that it's best to have a sense of what is happening in SFUSD, surrounding counties, in the state as a whole, before we land on a grading policy. We're a college prep school. We want to make sure that our students have the best shot they can at any college option. And so we have to be really thoughtful about how we approach the grading question, given the larger landscape of city and state and beyond. And so it's one that we are researching and awaiting guidance on, and will be clear about as soon as we have good information. And as we did in the spring, we may be reaching out to you to get feedback. We want to strike a balance of being flexible in understanding that we are in a pandemic and every family has different challenges. We may not be able to expect that every assignment gets turned in at the same time because demands on families vary. And at the same time, we want to make sure that students learn, and we want to make sure that students are advancing with grade level content. And so we want to strike the right balance to be clear about expectations, and also to be equitable, and also be responsive to the needs and realities of this moment.
Great. So we have time for one more question, and this one has been asked by several parents. There's a lot of questions around how our college counseling program will work, related to applying for colleges, thinking about applying for scholarships, and just knowing that our normally 11th graders and 12th graders have that full semester of college counseling.
Yeah, again, we're fortunate that we're not having to change our program or reduce what's offered in terms of services for kids. So we will still be offering college counseling classes. Our college counselors have also made it a point to be more available for one-on-one meetings with students and families. I know this last summer they spent a lot of time talking about talking with graduating seniors, given that a lot of them had changes of plan based on changes in their colleges. And so college counseling will still be there. We are constantly keeping an eye on announcements from the UCs, CSUs, private schools, independent schools, HBCUs, College Board, all of those different systems, including SAT and ACT updates, so that we are ensuring our kids still have the best shot at all of the options we know they've worked so hard for. So that's going to continue to be a priority for us to make sure is still available. And a part of that means making sure they still have access to the classes that they want. So that is absolutely still a priority for us. I also want to just respond really quickly. I know we're at time too, about a question about mental health and wellness services as well, which, as I mentioned before, I think is especially true and especially important right now, given all of the stressors folks are living in. And we are fortunate to have an incredible counseling team. Our counseling team is actually growing next year. We're taking on 3 interns from USF, in addition to having 2 full-time counselors at Gateway. And they already are putting in place structures to offer telecounseling services, which we began in the spring because we already had students who were getting support to mental health services. And so that will go out right away at the beginning of the year. There'll be an opportunity for kids and for families and for teachers to make referrals for students who need support. And we're also thinking about school-wide how we can support overall health, emotional, and physical well-being at a time where it's more important than ever. And so that's another thing that we're continuing to offer and are thinking about ways of actually expanding and growing because of the need and importance right now.
Right. That is all we can get to tonight.
We want to thank you all for being here. I see that we've got 115 families. I wish I could see your faces. I really miss being in the building with your kids. I may have not felt that way in June, but I am so ready to be back right now. I'm just kidding. But if you do have any questions for us, you know, we're all working and available. Amorne is 1 week in and already kicking butt and taking numbers along the way. And I hope that she gets a chance to also meet you all because you are the heart of our school. And so we've got our emails up here if you want to reach out with any questions or follow up or feedback. Your input and voice in this is invaluable.
Yeah, I just want to add my gratitude to all of you for being here, and also my sincere empathy as an educator and also as a parent. This is a really difficult time for families, and we are here for you, and we want to help problem solve with you. So please do reach out if there's anything that you need.
And I just look forward to meeting all of you real soon, hopefully. And if not, I definitely will be reaching out through phone just to introduce myself and get to at least speak to you. So I look forward to that.